Well, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the BEA, just released the GDP number for Q3, and the economy has expanded by 2.6% annually, which begs the question, are we heading into a recession or not? In this video, I'll be talking about the current signs of a recession, what is causing this recession, and how you can protect and even increase your wealth during this weird time. But before we get into it, make sure you like and subscribe because every week I analyze tons of data points to come up with the best strategy for you to come out ahead of the game. And without further ado, let's get going. The GDP for Q1 and Q2 were negative, which indicates that the economy was slowing down. The problem is that there was really no other signs of a slowdown. Corporate profits are at an all-time high. Q2 profits are 2.6% higher than a year ago and a whopping 6.2% compared to Q1 of this year. We will see what the Q3 earnings number look like later in November, but right now it is a mixed bag. Oil companies are doing great, but Amazon adjusted its Q4 sales forecast lower. Google missed its earnings estimate. Apple beat its estimate but on lower sales. Facebook also lowered its Q4 revenue forecast, and same with Microsoft. Now, if we look at unemployment, unemployment is at full employment at 3.5% and lower than the natural unemployment rate of 4.4%. So where is this recession? Are there any signs that the recession is coming? The only sign is the inverted yield curve. And what is that? Well, a normal yield curve would have higher yield for 10-year bonds compared to a 2-year bond. The logic behind it is that there's more risk involved when you invest in a longer period of time. When the yield curve is inverted, it means that a yield bond for the 10-year bond is lower than the 2-year bond, which suggests that investors think there's more risk buying 2-year bond than the 10-year bond. That's the only tangible sign that we have, really. The inflation has surged dramatically this year because of the increase in money supply and some supply chain issues that we're still experiencing. But that's not a sign of a recession. The Fed seems very determined to bring that inflation down, even if that means starting a recession to make it happen. But what's the problem with high inflation? Well, it reduces purchasing power. When the inflation is between 3 and 4%, it is kind of like manageable. Workers get salary increase to keep up with the price increase. When the inflation is at 8%, well, nobody's going to get a 10% increase in salary, are they? So most workers will have to cut their spending, and some families may not be able to afford a car, a house, vacation. They may have to even choose like cheaper food to make do. So sounds pretty bad, but how do we fight inflation? The Fed can affect inflation by increasing interest rate. When the interest rate is rising, it slows down the demand for the entire economy. People can't afford a car because the interest rate on the car loan is too high. It also indirectly impacts mortgage rates. When the mortgage rates go up, owning a home becomes less affordable, so the demand for housing drops, which also increases the number of renters, so rents go up. Overall, the cost of housing goes up. Ironically, the cost of housing represents 32% of the basket of goods that is used for measuring inflation. So when the Fed increases the interest rate to reduce inflation, that actually keeps the inflation high because the cost of housing went up. That's what happened when you try to fix plumbing problems and the only tool you have is a hammer. So why is the Fed increasing interest rate then? Because they believe in what is called the Phillips curve, which shows that the lower the unemployment, the higher the inflation. Since unemployment is below the natural unemployment rate of 4.4%, the Fed is slowing the economy down such that unemployment goes up, and that will slow down the inflation. It sure sounds like the Fed is trying to cause a recession. Well, let me get this straight. The Fed is taking these actions because high inflation would reduce the standard of living of most workers. The Fed is increasing the interest rates to cause the recession that will put workers out of a job. Does that make any sense? What we have right now is a supply issue. If we have a supply problem, does it make sense to crush the demand to slow inflation? We need to increase supply. A good example of that is real estate. We are 4 million units short. What the Fed is doing is making it too expensive to buy a house and rent a house. We need to figure out a way to build more units. And what the Fed is currently doing by increasing interest rate It's reducing the supply. It's making harder to build more houses. It's actually putting builders out of business. So that means it's going to create less housing, less units, and that's going to cause a higher cost of living, which again is going to push the inflation higher. Well, this is all very interesting, but honestly, I don't have the phone number for Jerome Powell. I can't influence him in any way. So the real question is, how do you protect your wealth and even increase your wealth during this crazy time? Well, you have to put your money to work. In many ways, money is an illusion. Money is a piece of paper that allows us to buy things as long as we all agree that this has some value. They even write on it, "In God we trust," which is another way of saying, I hope to God it is worth something. In high inflation, you won't be able to buy as many things next year as you can today. If a cup of coffee costs $5 today, you can buy 20 cups of coffee. But with inflation, that same cup of coffee will cost $5.40 next year. So you can only buy 18 cups with that same $100. It's losing purchasing power. To preserve its value, you want to convert these bills into real assets that generate income and appreciate over time. It is even better if you can use leverage to buy bigger assets. What do I do to protect my wealth and even increase my wealth? I buy real estate rental properties that are cash flowing. And here's how it works. The tenant is paying for all your expenses, including the mortgage. Let's say I have $25,000 to invest. Today, I could buy 5,000 coffees with that money. If I leave that money in my drawer, it will lose purchasing power. 2 years from now, I will only be able to buy 4,200 and such cups of coffees, 700 coffees less in 2 years. Instead, if you take this money to buy a rental property worth $100,000, you put $5,000 in closing costs, $20,000 in down payment, and get a mortgage for $80,000. In 2 years, the house appreciated by about $4,000. The tenant paid the rent, all its expenses, the mortgage, including $1,500 loan pay down, and you are left with $250 a month in net cash flow. At the end of 2 years, your $25,000 turned into $31,500, and you can then buy 5,400 coffees or 400 more coffees than you can buy today. This is the power of investing. This is why I'm telling you that this is absolutely critically important that you convert these bills into real assets that are appreciating and generating cash flow. I hope you found this information helpful. Make sure you like and subscribe because every week I share with you the information you need to know to protect your wealth. Talk to you later.